Fiction, as I see it, it's like a hyper reality. It's where time can slow down and time can speed up, and you're inside people's heads, or you're seeing them in new ways, whether it's actually through things they say or things they think, or through gestures, or through the sky, as the sky happens to be a certain way. So you have the opportunity to infuse meaning into a whole bunch of things that in our own lives may or may not be there, but when it's a work of fiction, it seems to ring louder on the page for readers, I think. It's why people are drawn to fiction and always have been. Even before the novel existed, I mean, there were fictions, whether it's earlier religions or it's philosophies or even politics, or a lot of that's fiction as well. The stories are fundamentally what separates human beings from the rest of the species, I think. We're storytelling people, and we have to have them, and if we don't, we create them. And fiction, for me, as coming out of history, is a very powerful way to tell stories, because, as I said earlier, you're inside the story as opposed to being outside and analyzing it in some manner or other. They're equally valid, and there's room for both, and we have a need for both, but I think just fiction it works at a very deep level for the human beings. They need stories, they crave stories, whether they're in novels or on television or in movies or wherever.
So you talk about the difference there between history and fiction, but I mean, your work, it would be considered historical fiction. So I don't know, can you talk about that? I mean, you kind of have blurred the two a little bit. Would you agree with that? Or?
What I'd say is I've channeled my knowledge of history and used what was good for the story to illuminate either the setting or the atmosphere or the characters or the kinds of things they would be thinking about or talking about. So I think the fact that I come out of history gave me a very strong basis to make the period come alive, make the characters come alive. So I think it's a good thing. I know many novelists do a lot of research on their stories, to make them historical fiction. Well, I didn't do a lot of research because that's what I've been doing for a quarter century. So I just simply channeled what I've learned and used the bits that I felt helped propel the story. Another example I sometimes give about what I aspire to is I aspire to have the stories really tick, that they really move along, like they tick like a clock, so it's constantly advancing, and the reader's not left wishing it would move, but it moves constantly, I think. And the other thing is that it ticks a little bit like a bomb, so there's always an element of suspense as to what's going to happen next with these characters. What are they going to say? What are they going to do? And regularly in this particular book, it's set up so that the characters hope for something or other to happen, and it rarely does. It's usually something else. And I think that's true to most of our lives, is that there's unintended consequences everywhere, and we live with them and deal with them and move on. So I guess that my view of that's how reality is in the book there, is in the novel.
Yeah. I want to ask you a bit more about your, you have a real clear view now of what fiction is and how it should work. But you were a historian before you were writing history. Did you have different expectations of fiction before you started writing it, or did you expect the writing to be similar, or did you learn these things along the way?
Well, with my fellow historians, we used to occasionally say, well, it must be so easy to write fiction because you can just make it up. And it was only when I actually tried to write fiction that I found how challenging it is. And it's not just making up dialogue and inventing characters and finding a plot, but it's making it work and making it work efficiently and economically. So I didn't want to write 400 pages of just invented whatever. It had to actually be coherent and have themes and have weight to it. And I think there is weight. I think depending on the reader, some people it'll be just the action maybe that interests them, or the atmosphere. For others, it may be all of that, plus the fact that there's some ideas discussed in these books or presented in these books, whether it's about religion, or it's about the structure of society, or relationships between people, friendships that aren't friendships, or love that isn't lust, isn't love, but it's lust. So I like to think there's a lot of meat in the book. But if you don't want the meat, you can just simply have the plot and the action and the atmosphere.